The air here in our A&E, it's thick, not just with the usual clinical tang of disinfectant and fear, but with something far more insidious, a suffocating indifference. I stand here, Eleonora, a nurse and A&E specialist, and honestly, sometimes I feel like a witness at a slow motion atrocity. My heart, it just aches with a fury that threatens to consume me. Every shift is a battle, not just against illness and injury, but against a system that seems hell-bent on stripping dignity from those who need it most. Look at Robert Taylor, 83 years old, if he's a day, brought in 4 hours ago after a fall. He's been in that chair, a flimsy plastic thing, ever since. No blankets, no proper assessment beyond a cursory glance. He's slumped, shivering, his eyes darting around with a lost, bewildered fear that tears right through me. I saw his trousers were damp, probably from incontinence, a common, utterly human consequence of age, of trauma, of being left to wait in an unforgiving environment. And what happened? Nothing. He was simply left, ignored. I asked a colleague if Robert had been assisted, if he needed to be changed. The response? A shrug. We're swamped, Eleonora. He's not critical. We have a gunshot wound just come in, not critical. As if a man's dignity, his comfort, his basic human right to not sit in his own waste isn't critical. It's not just Robert. I see it every single day. The elderly are elders pushed to the margins, deemed less urgent, less deserving. Mrs. Jenkins, 91, suffering from acute confusion, was left in a corridor on a trolley for 6 hours last week. 6 hours, her confusion exacerbated by the noise, the bright lights, the sheer overwhelming chaos, without a familiar face, without so much as a hand to hold. Her family were told to go home and get some rest because she's stable now. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about. Her terror was palpable, a silent scream of distress that I alone seemed to hear. And when I tried to advocate to find her a quieter spot, even just a cubicle, I heard Dr. Miller, bless his efficient, unfeeling heart, muttering about bed blockers and frailty syndrome taking up resources, frailty syndrome, as if being old and vulnerable is a diagnosis that condemns you to the bottom of the pile. It's not a medical diagnosis these people need. It's a restoration of their fundamental humanity, which this system, this society, is systematically stripping away. There's a silent message being sent, isn't there? To these individuals, to their families, to all of us. It whispers that once you reach a certain age, once you're no longer deemed productive or urgent in the sharp clinical sense, your worth diminishes. You become a burden, a statistic, an inconvenience. This isn't just about overcrowding or underfunding, though those are real issues. This is about a profound systemic lack of respect, a societal prejudice that permeates the very walls of our health institutions. It's sterile coldness versus raw, vulnerable despair. And the despair, it's winning. We're failing them. We're failing Robert, Mrs. Jenkins, countless others. We're failing ourselves by allowing this to become the norm. What kind of society are we building when we treat our most vulnerable with such callous disregard? When does the humanity of a health system become less about healing the body and more about preserving the soul? This isn't just a hospital in crisis. It's a moral crisis. And my helplessness in the face of it. It's a feeling I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. We must do better. We simply must. It's another shift, another sea of faces, another cacophony of groans and urgent beeps. But tonight, the weight of it all feels heavier, pressing down on my chest until I can barely breathe. How many times have I stood here in this overcrowded, under-resourced pit of a place, watching dignity bleed away drop by painful drop? My name is Eleonora, and I work in A&E, but sometimes I wonder if I'm an accidental witness to a slow-motion tragedy, a humanity forgotten. Robert Taylor is just one example, one shattered reflection in a kaleidoscope of neglect. He's 84, came in with a suspected chest infection, but his real affliction, the one that broke my heart, was the crushing indifference he faced. He arrived by ambulance early this morning, slumped and frail, clearly in distress. We triaged him quickly, as always, but then came the endless waiting. Hour after hour he sat, forgotten, on a hard plastic chair, bundled in a thin hospital blanket. I saw him shiver, saw the small, pathetic tremor in his hands as he tried to grasp a cup of water, left just out of reach on a passing trolley. No one saw him, or rather, they looked through him. I watched a junior doctor, fresh out of medical school, glance at his notes and mutter, just another old chap with a cough, probably been sat at home too long. That dismissive wave of the hand, that casual reduction of a person's entire life into a clitch, it ignites a fury in me that I have to swallow, choke down to keep doing my job. By the time I managed to properly check on Mr. Taylor, almost 8 hours later, his dignity was in tatters. He hadn't been able to make it to the toilet alone, too weak, too proud to ask for help repeatedly after being ignored the first few times. He sat there, a puddle on the floor around his chair, his eyes wide with a shame that wasn't his to bear. I saw the flash of embarrassment, the desperate attempt to hide it, and my stomach churned. This wasn't a medical emergency, this was a social crime. Dr. Miller, when I finally cornered him, just shrugged. Eleonora, we've got a massive pileup of urgent trauma cases, a stroke in Rhesus, another suspected mine. He's stable, just needs a bed on the ward. We'll get to him, stable. As if his emotional state, his sheer humiliation, meant nothing. It's just a common cold. They're old, the unspoken mantra of a system overwhelmed, yet disturbingly desensitized. It's not just Robert. I see it every single day. Mrs. Henderson left on a trolley in the corridor for 12 hours, her privacy obliterated by the constant foot traffic. Mr. Davies shouting in confusion because no one had explained where he was or why he was there, only to be labeled disruptive. We're so quick to medicalize, to pathologize, to sedate, rather than simply listening, truly seeing them. Our society has built these shiny, sterile institutions, yet somehow, in the process, we've stripped away the very humanity they're meant to protect. The elderly, our elders, become a burden, a drain on resources rather than repositories of wisdom, love, and experience. They are relegated to the bottom of the list, a queue of the forgotten, waiting not just for treatment, but for an acknowledgement of their worth. This isn't about medical outcomes anymore. It's about a profound moral failing. The fluorescent lights of NE, that harsh, unforgiving glare, expose not just physical wounds, but the gaping chasm in our collective conscience. We are failing them collectively, systematically. The NHS, a beacon of care, is becoming a revolving door for the forgotten, a place where the vulnerable are crushed under the weight of an indifferent machine. How can we call ourselves a compassionate society when we allow such cruelty to unfold in plain sight, day after day, year after year? Robert Taylor's ordeal is a stark, painful reminder that we have lost something vital, something irreplaceable. We must do better. We simply must. Another night, another battlefield. Not against some aggressive disease, not against time itself, but against the sheer, suffocating weight of indifference. Look around you if you dare. This isn't just an A&E in Liverpool. It's a holding pen, a waiting room for the forgotten. And tonight, as with every night, the oldest amongst us bear the brunt of it, their dignity slowly, systematically stripped away under the harsh fluorescent lights. My name's Eleonora, and I'm just trying to make sense of the cruelty I witness, the inhumanity we've somehow come to accept. I walked past Robert Taylor just an hour ago, 87 years old, a decorated veteran from what I gather, now curled on a trolley, shrunken, vulnerable. He'd been admitted for what was initially thought to be a stroke, but after 9 hours, the provisional diagnosis was general decline. General decline. What does that even mean when his eyes plead with you, when his frail hand trembles trying to grasp yours? He'd been asking for a drink for hours. His voice, barely a whisper, was drowned out by the cacophony, by the shouts of frustrated relatives, the bleeps of machines, the casual chatter of colleagues too desensitized to hear the quiet desperation. I found him soaked, not just his gown, but the sheet beneath him, because he wet himself, too ashamed, too weak to call out for the commode again after being told, "We're busy, love, someone will get to you." He was just left there, shivering, tears of shame tracking lines through the grime on his face. This isn't just about a medical condition. It's about a man, a human being, reduced to a soiled bundle on a trolley. When I gently asked Dr. Miller if we could prioritize getting Robert cleaned and into a bed, not just for comfort, but for basic human decency, she just sighed. "Eleonora, we've got two traumas coming in. He's stable. He's just old. They manage. They manage." That's the phrase that echoes in these corridors, a chilling euphemism for they suffer in silence. It creates an internal scream in me every time I hear it. It's not just Dr. Miller. It's the insidious culture that permeates this entire system. We talk about bed blockers, about resource allocation, about efficiency, but never about the fundamental right to be treated as a person, irrespective of your age or perceived usefulness. I saw Margaret last week, 91, with advanced dementia, strapped into a chair near the reception desk for 7 hours because there was nowhere else. She was agitated, confused, crying out for her mother. No privacy, no comfort, just spectacle. And then there was Arthur, who had been left without his hearing aids for days, effectively rendering him mute and deaf in this overwhelming environment. How do you communicate your needs, your fear, your pain when you're systematically disarmed? These aren't isolated incidents. They are daily rituals of diminishment. This isn't healthcare anymore. It's a warehouse system for the elderly where compassion is a luxury and dignity is an afterthought. We've built a society that applauds youth and innovation, yet shunts its elders into the shadows, deeming them a burden, a drain on resources. And this hospital, our beloved NHS, is merely a reflection of that societal prejudice, amplifying the message that if you're old, you're less valuable, less deserving. The cold, hard reality of these sterile walls, the relentless beeping, the constant rush, it all compounds the fear and isolation these patients feel. I see it in their eyes of profound despair, a question: is this how my life ends? Undignified, unwanted, unheard? This isn't a medical failure we're witnessing. It's a moral one. It's a system that has forgotten its humanity. And frankly, it's a shame that should haunt us all. We have to do better. We simply must. I have to stop for a moment. What I see in this A&E goes beyond simple medicine. It's a human failure. I ask you, what would you do if this were your grandparent? Ignored, humiliated? We cannot stay silent. Silence is complicity. Get involved. Share this story, educate yourselves on the rights of the elderly, and raise your voice against the system. Now, back to Robert Taylor. The fluorescent lights in and hum a relentless, unforgiving tune, casting a pallor over everything, especially the faces of those who wait. It's a sound that's become the soundtrack to my indignation, a constant reminder of the unseen battles fought here every single night. I'm Eleonora, and I've seen enough to know that some battles aren't against disease, but against sheer indifference. Tonight, like far too many nights, it's the elderly who are losing. Robert Taylor was brought in hours ago, 87 years old, a fall at home. He'd been lying on his kitchen floor for God knows how long before a neighbor found him. His notes mentioned disorientation, a suspected UTI. But what truly struck me was the utter defeat in his eyes. He wasn't just physically broken. His spirit seemed to have been chipped away by the system, by the very place meant to heal him. He's been here in this corridor for 7 hours. 7 hours. Imagine the indignity of that. Lying on a trolley, exposed, his frail dignity shredded by the constant rush, the noise, the sheer lack of privacy. Each passing minute, each averted gaze, tells him he's simply not important enough. I tried to get him into a bay, just a small curtained off space, but the answer was always the same. Eleonora, we're overwhelmed. He's stable. There are more urgent cases, more urgent cases. As if a man, 87, who has served his country, paid his taxes, raised a family, suddenly becomes less urgent, less human because of his age. It's a casual brutality that chills me to the bone. I saw a nurse walk past, then return with a small cup of water for someone younger, ignoring Robert's quiet cough. He didn't ask, he wouldn't. He just lay there, a silent testament to the disregard he's grown accustomed to. That's the real humiliation, isn't it? The expectation of being ignored, the quiet acceptance of being less. Later, I overheard Dr. Miller, barely glancing at Robert's chart, dismiss his confusion as just old age. He said it with a shrug, as if cognitive decline is a blanket diagnosis for every elderly person who enters these doors, negating the need for any real investigation or, God forbid, empathy. It wasn't a medical observation. It was a societal judgment, and it cut right through me. It's not just old age, doctor. I wanted to scream. It's a human being with a history, with feelings. But I didn't. Because I know the look I get, the exasperated sigh, the I roll, the insinuation that I'm being overly emotional, too soft, simply not pragmatic enough for this cold, hard environment. This isn't an isolated incident. I see it every shift. The elderly are left in soiled incontinence pads for hours because staff are stretched thin, or worse, because they're seen as less deserving of prompt care. They're spoken over not to. Their anxieties are brushed aside as senility. They are not patients. They are statistics, bed blockers, burden. This hospital, this NHS, it's a microcosm of a society that increasingly sees its elders as inconvenient, as disposable. We celebrate youth, productivity, speed, and those who no longer fit that mold. They're shunted to the side, left to wait, to fade, to endure humiliation in plain sight. The sterile white walls of this department, the relentless beeping of machines, it all seems to amplify their despair. They come here seeking comfort, a brief respite from their pain, and often find themselves in a gauntlet of dehumanization. It makes my blood boil. How have we become so utterly devoid of compassion? How has the very system designed to care for the vulnerable become so adept at stripping them of their most fundamental right, their dignity? This isn't just about bed shortages or funding cuts, though those are real. This is about a profound rot in our collective soul, a societal blindness to the quiet suffering of our oldest citizens. We are failing them catastrophically, and if we don't start seeing them as people, as our future selves, then what kind of society are we truly building? We need to look, really look, at what's happening in these corridors before it's too late for all of us. The fluorescent lights and he hum a constant, weary song, a soundtrack to desperation. Tonight, though, the noise feels different. It's not just the usual chaos, it's a palpable scream of injustice. My name's Eleonora, and I've seen things here that would turn your stomach, things that question what kind of society we've become. People queue for hours, sometimes days, in corridors offering no privacy, no dignity. But it's our elderly who bear the brunt, treated as an inconvenience, an afterthought. They built this country, fought our wars, raised our families, and now we discard them. Take Robert Taylor, 84 years old, frail, confused after a fall at home. He's been here for 12 hours. 12 hours, sat on a hard plastic chair, bewildered, occasionally murmuring his wife's name. His trousers are damp. I suspect he's had an accident, but every time I've tried to get him to a cubicle or even just the loo, there's always more urgent cases. More urgent than a man who served his country, who deserves a moment of basic human decency. He's not got some exotic disease. He's just old, and that, apparently, his gravest diagnosis. The betrayal burns in my gut. I watched him earlier, his shoulders slumped, head bowed. He tried to catch the eye of a passing junior doctor, a polite, almost apologetic cough. The doctor, bless him, barely glanced over his shoulder, just a swift, dismissive shake of the head. We're completely swamped, mate, he muttered without breaking stride. Mate, this is Robert Taylor, not some anonymous fixture. I saw the flash of hurt, then resignation in Robert's eye. It's a look I've seen too often, silent acceptance of being irrelevant. It's a silent, emotional humiliation, chipping away at their very being. I tried to raise it again with Dr. Miller. Eleonora, love, he's stable. He's just taking up a bed, isn't he? We've got real emergencies, real emergency. As if a man's dignity, his worth, isn't an emergency. This isn't about medical urgency. It's about a deeply ingrained lack of respect, systemic indifference. It's about how we, as a health service and as a society, have come to view our elders not as people with lives and stories and rights, but as bed blockers, drainers of resources, the walking wounded who just won't quite walk out of the door fast enough. I see it every shift. Mrs. Henderson, who waited 18 hours on a trolley in the corridor, her hearing aid misplaced, unable to understand what little information was shouted her way. Mr. Davies, whose privacy was utterly stripped away when he needed help to the commode, wheeled past a dozen strangers without so much as a scream. We preach privacy, we preach dignity, yet it's the first thing to be sacrificed when the system creaks. And it's always the most vulnerable who pay the price. My heart aches with a frustration almost physical. I fight for them. I truly do. I advocate, I cajole, I sometimes even shout, but it feels like chipping away at granite with a teaspoon. The sheer scale of indifference embedded in the very fabric of our operation is soul destroying. We are failing them, not just medically, but morally. We're telling them their lives, their comfort, their final years are worth less than the next statistics on a whiteboard. This isn't about short staffing, though that plays its part. This is about a fundamental shift in values, a cold, clinical efficiency that has squeezed out compassion. We've replaced care with targets, humanity with bed numbers. The betrayal isn't just Britain's, it's ours. It's in every ignored plea, every undignified wait, every time an elderly person feels like a burden. We owe them more than this. We are better than this. Or at least, we used to be. Until we acknowledge this profound failure of human decency, the hum of this A&E will remain a funeral dirge for the forgotten. Look around you. Just look. This isn't a hospital. It's a holding pen. A purgatory of plastic chairs and fluorescent lights where the sick and the desperate converge and the vulnerable are often forgotten. I'm Eleonora, an A&E nurse, and I've seen things in these corridors that should shock us all to our core. Things that speak of a rot far deeper than any virus. My outrage isn't born of frustration with paperwork or even the crushing lack of staff, though God knows that's constant. It's born of watching elderly patients, the very people who built this country, reduced to footnotes, dismissed as burdens. Just last week, Robert Taylor, a man of 86, came in after a fall. He lay on a trolley in a bustling corridor for 10 hours. 10 hours exposed to everyone, no privacy, barely acknowledged. His pajama bottoms, which he'd soiled in his confusion, remained unchanged for half that time. He was lucid enough to be deeply, profoundly ashamed, shrinking into himself, trying to make himself invisible. And what was the response from some? Oh, he's just old, Eleonora. These things happen, as if age grants an automatic pass to indignity, as if a lifetime of contribution means nothing once your steps falter. I watched him, his eyes filled with a quiet terror, a humiliation that cut deeper than any physical pain. I managed to get him clean, found him a moment of peace behind a flimsy screen, but the damage was done. The look in his eyes, it haunts me. It's a look I see too often, a silent plea for respect, a desperate hope to be seen as a human being, not just a bed number, not just another frequent flyer in the system. This isn't an isolated incident. I've seen Mrs. Davies, 92, with advanced dementia, tied loosely to a chair because we're too short staffed to constantly monitor her, her calls for her long dead husband ignored as merely confusion. I've overheard Dr. Miller, a man I usually respect, wave off concerns about Mr. Peterson's persistent cough with. It's just a common cold, Eleonora. He's 84. What do you expect? We've got genuine emergencies waiting. Genuine emergency. As if a human life, fragile and suffering, somehow becomes less genuine simply because of the number of years they've lived. It's an insidious prejudice, a quiet violence perpetuated by a system and a society that increasingly devalues its elders. They're not seen as repositories of wisdom or cherished family members, but as drains on resources, statistics, and inconvenience. We talk about bed blocking like they're inanimate objects, not people who deserve a safe, dignified place to recover or simply exist. The sterile hum of the machines, the incessant chatter of staff, it all forms a deafening chorus that drowns out the quiet cries for help, the desperate longing for a kind word, a gentle touch. My hands are tied. I can advocate, I can try to shield them to provide moments of warmth in this cold, indifferent environment. But I am just one person against a tide of systemic neglect, a culture that prioritizes speed and efficiency over compassion and dignity. How can we, as a society, stand by and let this happen? How can we claim to be civilized when we treat our most vulnerable with such casual disregard? It's not a lack of funding that's the sole issue, it's a crisis of conscience, a fundamental failing to recognize the inherent worth of every single human life, regardless of age or ailment. We are failing them. We are failing ourselves. And the echoes of their despair, I promise you, will reverberate through our own futures if we do not demand change, if we do not find our humanity again.